when a dog comes into the shelter, there are usually a couple of things that they will evaluate just on as part of their outdated routines. They'll put them in a play yard and do a socialization assessment, and whether or not they know how to do socialization assessments well will make or break that experience and what the dog's MO will become moving forward. Number two, they'll tether the dog or back tie it to something, put a bowl of food down, the dog begins to eat, and immediately everyone wants answers and ends up being more, yes, absolutely, because their goal is to say, will this dog resource guard? If it shows any indication of guarding, it's not safe, put it on the euthanasia list. Yeah, well, this'll, I'm hoping this will help you. So they put the bowl, if you think about it, if you were in prison and living on white bread and American cheese, and someone brought you into a room and put a steak down in front of you, and you went to eat, and then they pulled you back and said, put your napkin in your lap first, and did you say your prayers or, grace or whatever people do before they eat or supposed to do. And you've got this steak and all the smells coming up into your nose, and all you want to do is eat, and some stranger is poking at you. That is what the assess-a-ham will do. Now, any dog who lives in confinement is going to have much different needs for space and safety and trust before you actually can get a fair read on them, okay? So that's why we're talking about it. Now look, whether the shelter is outdated or not, whether they use assess-a-hands or not, one of the most challenging behaviors to navigate, there are two, in my opinion, these are the two most difficult behaviors to deal with shelter dogs. Hi, baby. Number one is the guarding of space. Always set aware enough to be put up. Yes, they obviously know that it's totally not a real hand. In fact, I had shared a video of a dog I placed from a shelter, and the shelter behavior person, who was a complete moron, putting an assess-a-hand up his sleeve, reaching towards the dog. He had a personality conflict with this dog because he was always very rough on the animal. He holds food in the hand, the fake hand. The dog goes to get it. He pulls the hand away. The dog bites the hand, and he says, that dog is dangerous, which in fact it was not. The two most difficult behaviors to navigate that will get dogs euthanized very, very quickly. Number one, guarding of space. Primarily, that will get them in trouble fast because it prohibits the shelter handlers, volunteers, or staff from actually handling the dog because they can't get the dog out of the kennel. And that's why we're going to talk about it. The second most risky behavior, this surprisingly, neither of these are aggression. Anything can manifest as aggression, but the second most risky behavior, at least with the shelters I was affiliated with, is protest behavior. And protest behavior essentially is, thank you for all the hearts, you guys. I get so passionate about this stuff, I forget to say thank you and welcome and hi, everybody. Protest behavior is a dog that absolutely is panic-stricken about being returned to a kennel. And so as they realize you are walking them back, whether it's from their walk or the play yard or training session or whatever, as they begin to understand you are putting them back behind that door in their cage, they will do anything not to be confined because their anxiety is so pronounced, understandably. They're confined 23 hours a day. So when you bring them back, it can escalate to the point that they are going after you as the handler. Elaborate setups, I don't know what that means. If a behavior specific skill, they will be able to see the dog without elaborate well, it depends on what the criteria for the shelter is to determine whether or not the dog guards objects or spaces. But in fact, protest behavior is harder to deal with than guarding the kennel, because it's on the way back when the dog is with you that they begin to show this, and then putting them. I have been locked in a kennel with the dog who blocked the front door because he did not want me to leave him in there. And if he was going to be in there, I had to stay in there with him. And I managed it, but that behavior can become very tricky very, very quickly. Okay, so this is what I want to show you. Now, obviously, I don't have a full kennel here to demo, and Luke is very confused. But these, look, it's not a shelter environment, but we're going to pretend. You may recall, let's get your bottle out of the way, that when Maya was here, I had a number of these folding panels that I put across that back room. So I'm going to use this as a demo for you, and you're just going to pretend that this is the front of a kennel in a shelter. Or if you're at home, this might be your baby gate. If your dog guards space, why am I yelling? Am I yelling? I'm not. Am I yelling? I'm passionate. But, you know, that's just what it is. If your dog guards space, you probably do not want to put them, I'm not yelling, someone's just being rude. You probably do not want to put them in a crate, because in a crate, you've all, it's passion, it is. You've seen those videos from the trainers that try to show you how dope they are by the dog inside the crate growling and baring teeth. It's such a show. The one way to diffuse that is to not lock the dog in a small space, because once the dog is locked into a small space, they have no flight option. And here you are, bigger and more physically intimidating, and they have no option but to threaten you, to make you go away. So any video you see of someone telling you what a cool handler they are because they're towering over a dog in a crate where they cannot get away is really someone who doesn't have the skills to deconstruct the panic to begin with. And that's how I want you to think. How can I solve this problem without creating pressure and conflict for the dog? So if you have a dog that guards space, you always want to try to convince your behavior team or whomever you report to not to have to use a slip lead in the kennel. You want the dog to wear oh, I don't have a collar on you. Let me put one on. I'm sorry, Luke. I'm just trying to be careful of his surgery shaving behind his ear. We'll do it very loose. You want to have that dog on a collar constantly because you need it to be attached to a drag leash. The leashes you're going to use should be, Luke is feeling better, but he's medicated right now for pain. You want your drag leash to be exceedingly lightweight. So this is very short. It's probably 3.5, maybe 4 feet. The dog should wear it at all times, so they have to have a collar on. If you're working with a slip lead, this won't be effective because the technique requires a point of contact. So I'm going to have a lightweight drag leash on the dog. You're then going to add, where is my other leash? They're everywhere. Multiple short leashes together. And you're just going to clip one to the next, to the handle, to the next, and you can have 6, 7, 8 of these clipped together. Why? When you put the dog up, We're going to pretend that's the door. This will then come through here. The multitude of leashes will be inside the kennel with the dog because we don't want them to get in a chokehold or the leash gets tangled around their corunda beds. If they have a back portion of the kennel, you want them to have enough length of leash to go to the back of the kennel without this happening. They should have to be able to access water, bed, food. But then what happens is you're going to take a clip of the leash that's attached to this or a carabiner, and you're going to clip that to the outside top of the kennel, okay? Not at face level, because if you approach the kennel and the dog doesn't want you there, they will bite your fingers, and you don't want to be fumbling with the crate door with the dog's mouth near your hand. So that becomes this, all the way up top at the kennel. This is presuming your kennel has bars, and we'll talk through the plexi options as well. Now, this is what's important. When the dog is in there, you just throw some food in, they go trailing in, and you bring the end point of all your leashes, you bring that through and clip it up and walk away. So that whomever follows, let me just make sure you're not asking me questions. Did you ask me anything? I'm sorry. Would you suggest a metal leash so they don't chew it? Yes, you can. I also have wire-coated, that's a good question, Jennifer. I have wire-coated leashes, but if they're chewers, you absolutely can use a chain leash. I just want mostly to be careful that whatever is attached to the dog isn't painful or uncomfortable for them. Can literally say HP. Can't name a product. I don't know what's happening. Yeah, I have to be very careful because my lives have been shut down several times. The harness, I would not. You can. It depends on the dog, right? So you're always going to leave variables for the dog. But look, this is what I want to tell you. One of the many things I want to tell you. When you approach the kennel, this will be clipped up high. You're not going to step to them like this. You're just going to hang out 2 feet from the kennel, throw food in, and walk on by. And systematically repeat that 5, 6, 7, 8 times. So now we are counter-conditioning your presence. You see me, you get food. I walk away, come back. You see me, food flies from the sky. Come back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And at some point, you slow down. Angle yourself halfway to the dog and whatever other space is in front of you. I would not get low. I would not look at the dog. I would remain completely neutral. You can smile, but your expression should not be one that the dog is trying hard to figure out what your intentions are. So if I step to the dog, now they're this, which then becomes this. That's the response that they rehearse. So you are trying to break that down so there's more thought and curiosity than defense or offense. Hold on. You're not sure why that person said I just come on. Oh, okay. All right, Gail, you do your thing in the comments. Because their behavior is so well rehearsed and because so many of these dogs were strays, they have a mechanism to deal. You have to remember that dogs need a certain amount of space to calibrate threat assessment. That is usually around 6 to 10 feet. So if I'm moving this way past the kennel, I'm not putting pressure on them. My presence just sends a signal of something good happened for you. When I slow down, I drop into a calm, pleasant, neutral affect, but I'm not trying to show the dog that I'm calm, neutral, and pleasant. I'm just trying to diffuse the desire to drive me away. And so once I've done that, I'm always going to unclip first. Most dogs will not attack you if you get the hell out of the way. So the first step is, if this is the kennel door, I'm going to open it slightly. And remember, this is not at head level for the dog. This is all the way up top. I just don't have that to show you. I'm going to brace the door with my foot. I'm going to slip that out through here. I'm going to let the dog take a second to notice the door is open. As the dog starts to move towards the door, I'm picking up the slack from some of those leashes. You may get to a point where you have only one or two and then unclipped the length and hang that on the door so that you have about 8 feet from the dog. You're going to, remember, we've unclipped it and removed it from the kennel, pulled it to the outside, and braced the door with your foot. At which point, when I'm ready to let the dog out, I'm behind it. And I let them go. Once they're out and moving, they're not turning around and coming back and attacking you. Almost always. Okay? A dog is only going to come after you if you're in their way or pressuring them. And once you get them out and they have freedom of movement, you do what you do. And then on the return, the same thing happens. Come back to the kennel, leave them plenty of space, throw food inside, close it, but don't make a big deal out of it like, bam, I got you. Loop it through and clip it up here. You're all leashed up. Does that make sense? Okay, because I want to move on to the portion of what happens once the dog starts to trust you and some of that edginess starts to dissipate. Now, a dog who's guarding space will only have a small group of friends. Maybe tricky question, how do I deal who has barrier aggression with dogs? So if there are, that's a great question. It's not really tricky at all. If the dog has barrier aggression with other dogs, meaning they're reactive to the dogs in kennels that are facing them or a tight space, shelter that's not well constructed and easy, tricky for you. So when I'm dealing with, I can't squat any longer. Let me sit down for a second. When I'm dealing with a dog who is volatile or violent, like a Jude, for example, if I was handling a dog like Jude in a shelter, I would close in every other dog on his row first. So they all have a front portion and a back portion to their kennels. I would lure all the dogs on 3 kennels down on the right side, 3 kennels down on the left side, lure them all to the back, close the guillotine door, close the guillotine door between the front and the back. That buys me some calm as I exit. As I exit, I'm throwing food to the ground. If the dog feels like they'll eat from my hand without a problem, I'm immediately sticking. Is this live recorded? I have the option to upload it later, to YT. I can do that. I'm sticking my hand. So I'll give you an example. I'm going to give you 2 examples of dogs that I've dealt with who were like this in the shelter. And one, you gave up on me? You don't love me anymore? His meds are kicking in. Hold on. So we had a purebred border collie at the shelter. And part of his problem, he was a gnarly, gnarly dog. No one could enter his space. He had absolutely no problem biting you. The dog also had constant, all day long diarrhea, which meant that not only was he nasty and unwelcoming of literally everybody, his kennel was so disgusting that nobody wanted to handle him except me and one other person. And we placed him, as a matter of fact, where he lives in his home to this day. Purebred dog was in that shelter for a year because nobody wanted to touch him. So when you're working with multiple leashes and you've got liquid poop all over the kennel, it wasn't just on the floor, it was on the walls. So that meant I was not to be deterred. Rubber gloves, like surgery gloves, so I didn't get infected. And I would change out all of his leashes, but I also took him to meet a potential adopter, and he tried to attack her. And after that, I got into the depths of it and realized that the reason he was so angry was because of his upset stomach. And I got him on probiotics and got his diet changed, and his entire personality changed. So not only do you have to have the handling techniques, you have to look past the behavior to try to figure out what is causing this situation for this dog. Yeah, I mean, I really miss being in shelters. I really do. But when I started pulling them into my home, I couldn't do both. It was just too much. And I pulled so many that it just became my life. So when I became friends with him and I had this system, which is how the shelter managed dogs who guard their space, once you start to feel like the dog is less edgy when they see you, there will come a point, if you do this effectively, that dog who absolutely wanted to remove your hands and go for you, they are looking forward to you being there. And so at that point, when you've established some kind of rapport with the dog, remember, we have never pressured them. We have never made exiting a big deal. We've taken our time. We've counter-conditioned our presence. We have techniques in place that protect us. We give the dog plenty of room to exit. Once you're at that point, you then want to change the way you approach the kennel, because you want to build something else so they can actually go home and not be a threat. So at that point, we had a 6-month-old purebred Malinois who was the same. The dog was this big, you could not go into the shelter. I don't know, Jennifer. I don't know. This is why I talk about it all the time. Once the dog is comfortable with you, you're going to change this very careful, oh, sorry. Hi, I don't need to involve you in it, do I? You're just here along for the ride. Luke is so confused right now. He's like, why is there a panel in the room? Once that dog is comfortable for you, I then want you to start, and once you're comfortable, you're going to switch that to unloping it. I still have my foot in front of the door. It's attached to the dog who's back there. I'm then just going to hang out in the door space with the dog. I've talked to the other volunteers. The dog is there. I may be throwing him food. I have not entered his space, but I've come a little bit closer. So if the threshold for his kennel is here, I'm now, I need an assistant. Instead of hiding behind the door, rather protecting myself or using it as a barrier, I'm actually opening it and joining the dog in proximity to his space. At the point that I get that and the dog is still eating and relaxed, I may come a little bit closer and just start messing with the leashes, not the dog. Maybe take another one off, swap them out. I'm just interfacing but with a buffer. Let's go, and then out we go. So now you're starting to close the gap between you and the dog, but you've put weeks into, or if you're there every day, I mean, I was there every day. So every day it was practice, 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 and then off to do something incredibly fun. For the Border Collie, I got big stuffed beach balls. I would take him out into a big field and let him herd them and all of that stuff. But over not too long a period of time, me showing up at the kennel was enthusiasm and excitement, not trepidation or offensive behavior. So that will then translate more readily into a home situation. And if you are advocating for the dog and you want to be able to place them, you want to be able to get permission from your behavior team to talk to the adopters or be the point person for the dog to demonstrate for them what this will look like at home. Now, there are multiple demo videos, as I recall, of me doing this with Maya. I could not step into that. That back room was paneled with 4 of these. And the second these gates went up, she would try to attack me at night. Over time, I just left them open a little bit. And once that pressure was removed, she stopped trying to attack me. Then I closed myself behind a baby gate. So I removed the fight. This is how you're going to guide adopters. You're going to help them set up their home, determine where the best location for a baby gate would be, some sort of space that the human can separate themselves from the dog, primarily because if the dog has some sort of medical, or this will be on my YT channel, Jennifer. So that I'll share the link in my stories, but you can find everything like this will be there. I will upload it for you so you can watch it again. You may have to remind me because I don't always remember. Once you bring the dog into the home, you want to set up a situation where the dog is not being forced into a crate space. Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. You don't want the dog to be forced into a crate space because it's going to reignite all of those panic responses. So we want to be able to give the dog a space, but if they're not trustworthy, and you remember a shelter dog takes 4 to 6 months to establish in the home, which means their behavior and demeanor can quickly change, even though they seem so helpless and timid in the beginning. Once they know where they are and they feel settled, that's when the ugly stuff comes out. So we want to set them up from the beginning and set the owner up from the beginning to create some consistent routine without the pressure. Okay? Anybody have any questions so far? Does this make sense? And if you're using if your shelter has the solid doors, plexi doors, or something that doesn't allow you, doesn't allow you to clip to the outside of the kennel, get creative. If it means that you loop a bunch of leashes together, remember each leash length should be 3 to 5 feet. You don't want the extra long that's going to get them tangled. Run type kennels to lock, same thing. You're always on the outside and you wait for the dog to come out. You do not enter their space because that's what they're expecting and that's what they're fighting. And if you take yourself out of it, but obviously you have to have backup and a point of contact so that you don't have a loose dog. Stepping into the space is where the dog is going to bite you. Okay, so you've seen people use corunda beds as barricades. You step behind that door. In my separation anxiety tab at the top of my page, Jude's bites were all coming out of a crate. So whenever I was doing crate training with him, which I abandoned eventually because it wasn't worth what it made him like, I always stood behind the door when I opened the crate, and he always had the wide side to come out of. I never made the dog go into the narrow end of a kennel because it's so restrictive and they feel like they can't get away if they want to. And most dogs, given the opportunity, will create distance before they aggress. That's why I'm saying you want to counter condition your presence first. Then you want to start slowly creating a little opening in that door while keeping yourself safe. And then as your relationship grows, you then start being a little less like divided from the dog, and you allow them to come out and just bring the barriers down emotionally, but first tactically and strategically arranging the space so that no one gets hurt, because you don't want the dog to you don't want them getting in trouble because you made a mistake. This is so important. So many of these dogs end up on the chopping block because the handler didn't know better and put themselves in a position where the dog is going to react badly, which brings me to resource guarding evaluations for shelter dogs. There is an organization called CSD, CSD, the CSD protocols, the Center for Shelter Dogs, or the something for shelter, I can't remember. They have protocols for resource guarding that are so effective. They take longer, which is why shelters don't do that. And they use the assess-a-hand because they're, like somebody else said, always in a hurry to get to is the dog going to do something wrong? Is this dog dangerous? We have to evaluate it. We're evaluating it. We want to see the behavior. No, you don't. This argument of provoke the dog into showing what they do wrong so that you can correct it, punish it, or euthanize it is barbaric, okay? I have worked with very dangerous dogs. If you remove the pressure, they stop fighting you so hard, okay? So if I'm doing an evaluation for resource guarding of food, for example, I am putting the dog on a back tie at one end of the room. And your back tie, let's just talk about tethering for a second. When you tether a dog in a shelter environment, you need a space to work. If you're working in a yard, you can use the chain link fence. But you want your back tie. There should be multiple back ties in this instance as well. So there should be one leash that's a drag leash that's long enough for you to pick up at a distance that's not attached to anything. Then there's another leash attached to the collar that is attached to a back tie, or multiple leashes to a back tie. You want your tether to be long enough that if the dog is near the wall, that they have 7 or 8 feet to create a diagonal, an arc. They can move in an arc. You don't want it to be, listen to me now, you don't want it to be so short that, imagine if it was you. You don't want it to be so short that it's on a back tie to a bolt in the wall, and the second the dog moves, it feels pressure. Yes, of course. I mean, it's absolutely caveman mentality to assess behavior that way. It's archaic. If I'm putting a dog on a back tie, again, I want freedom of movement. I do not want the dog to move and feel pressure. But I have to keep myself safe, because if that dog has been practicing behavior, aggressive behavior as a means of keeping themselves safe, or they're possessing their objects, horrible yes, there's a tab above my gallery called separation anxiety, and there is a lot of free information there. My approach to separation anxiety is very different than most people, but you'll get a pretty good sense from there. And then there's behavior help available in the tree on my bio. But again, separation is anxiety. It's all, resource guarding can be rooted in anxiety. I have to keep this. Someone's going to take this away from me. You're going to lock me in a it's all the same thing. It's all a panic response. It's the nervous system. Okay. If I'm putting the dog on the back tie, I want them to have freedom of movement, and I am not trying to interact with them. I'm not talking to them. I'm not what a good boying them. I can't begin to tell you how many handlers I work with that talk too much. If you think of that dog as being in a tightly coiled state of mind, anything you add into the mix, they have to evaluate it. They have to think about what it means. Eyes, ears, nose, taking in everything around them. They are so smart. So if you start throwing in a lot of nonsense, they're now trying to assess all of that. Everybody talks too much. You saw how I was working with Luke on the pivot bolt? I don't speak. I use only a few words in my training. Most of it is emotional communication and gestural. So you put the dog on the back tie, you remain neutral. You do not face the dog. You walk in a rounded circumference if you have to move at all, because that sends calming signals to the dog, not direct movement towards them. You take a bowl of food and you place it within their reach where that back tie can go. You slide it in. You don't step into their zone. You slide a bowl of food into the back tie area. Not too far in that you can't get it when you need it. And you allow that dog to eat, and you go and sit in a chair and don't say a word. Don't look at them. Don't talk to them. Record it. Watch the dog's body language when you're not in the thick of it and see, how did they respond when you move? Did they respond when nothing happened? Did they seem to be more at ease? Only towards the end of their meal are you going to toss a couple of pieces of high value food around the bowl. So if the bowl is here, your food is going to land 12 to 15 inches outside of where that food bowl is. And all we're after in those first few sessions is the dog's willingness to leave the bowl to retrieve it. Okay? That is all you're after. Don't good boy, good girl. Don't anything. All you want that dog to experience is that they can eat without being bothered. Juxtaposed to the assess a hand evaluation, which is blatantly saying to the dog, I'm putting you on a tight back tie. You're already conflicted and tense. I am going to now give you food, and I'm going to bother you while you're eating. If the dog wasn't a resource guarder, that is an excellent way to make them a resource guarder, right? So your initial intention is to create an environment where eating is easy and effortless. And they are, do you have to go out? What's your problem? You want to chase squirrels? He's not supposed to be running. And he is. Okay. He's so happy moving. That is part one. You do that for a couple of sessions. Now, this is going to likely be the same dog that guarded their space. Over time, as the dog shows more and more willingness to leave the bowl, the thing you layer on next is, as they're eating, you walk from one side of the room in a curved pattern. You don't look at the dog, you don't talk to the dog. You curve, take a walk to the other side of the room, come back and sit down again. All you want is for them to look up. You will probably get a hard stare in the beginning and then sit down. Yeah, well, we're all learning all the time, right? I work with Roxy's mama, so she knows exactly what this whole situation is about. The concept is, I'm going to show you pictures, whether it's from your kennel or around your food bowl or whatever else makes you become tense and more likely to lash out. I'm going to show you what pictures of non-interference look like, feel like, so that you can experience that again and again and again, so that food does not become something to fight over, space does not become something to fight over, and eventually I would layer in toys. So as the dog is eating, when they start to finish, I would throw a bunch of toys around the room because I don't want them grabbing or guarding one. There's just an abundance of everything. And as they go to retrieve a toy, I pick up that food bowl and I put it out of sight. I let them play, and then we go back to the kennel. And that's how you start to, so what I'm trying to get you to see is that a true assessment or eval of a shelter dog is not about what are you going to do wrong. It's about, let me get the best state of mind out of you and see if you continue to offer up dangerous behaviors, because most of the time they don't. Questions, anybody? I don't know if you saw a year ago, I've told you about the shelter that Maya is in. There was another dog in that shelter who was recently euthanized because he was a severe resource guarder. And another content creator on every app who stitches a lot of videos. You all know who I'm talking about. Constantly using other people's content to make a comment or a statement or to have an opinion. You never actually see that person doing the work, but they're constantly stitching videos of dogs doing bad things so that they can say that the dog should be euthanized, in my opinion. But yeah, stinking is the better word for it. But anyway, at some point in the last year or so, yes, Tiny Mike, exactly right. She posted a video of this dog, the resource guarder. I assumed it was her working with the dog. In fact, it was not. She just saw the video and stitched it. And what was disturbing about the video was her narrative. Yes, the dog was a severe resource guarder. But what happened in this clip, and I'm sure many of you have seen it, it just made my hair stand on end. The volunteers at that shelter, thank you. I mean, if I could travel around the country just working with shelters and behavior teams, I would. There were 2 volunteers in the room with this dog. The dog is a known resource guarder of everything, people, objects, food, obsessed with tennis balls, could get 3 or 4 tennis balls in its mouth. And it was a very large, very powerful pit bull with a bite history. In this video, the dog's volunteer friend, there's 2 volunteers in the room. There are protocols in place that there should only be 1 person with this dog at a time, which is in fact what got him euthanized. Not in that clip, but a year later. The volunteer sits down on the couch with the dog who is on the couch nomming on a tennis ball. He is on the couch next to her. I'm sure you guys have seen this video. She puts her arm behind his back on the back of the couch. He now is aware and alert. The second volunteer comes towards them and stands in front of the couch talking to the person seated on the couch. At which point this dog mauled the woman that was standing there. She should not have been, they're volunteers. They were not behaving. Oh, well, these were volunteers. These are not professionals. This is not part of the behavior team. And Canine had nothing to do with that video. She's not even anywhere near it. The point is, when you're working with dogs who have dangerous behavior, the protocols should, I'm not yelling at you, I'm just so emphatic, but when I saw that, it was so misleading because it made it seem like she had inside information about the dog and she didn't work with the dog at all. They wanted me to take that dog and I said no, because I knew how dangerous it was. And I felt it should be euthanized. Hi, how are you? What ended up happening with that dog a year later, they never euthanized the dog. Even though he mauled someone and put her in the hospital, she should never have been in the room. The other volunteers should never have been seated on the couch with him. There shouldn't have been tennis balls in the room. They were constantly trying to make social media content to show, see, he can have tennis balls. He's such a good boy. The volunteer population can be very risky to deal with. But what ended up happening was they found a sanctuary to take him. And on the day that transport was arriving, his bestie, volunteer, was sitting in a yard with him in a chair. He is eating his tennis balls in front of her. Back to her, facing out. The other volunteer comes into the yard. Strict protocols, never two people with the dog at the same time. At this point, the dog attacks the woman in the chair. She is gushing blood, and now he's guarding her. And no one can help her. It was a horrible, horrible situation on the day he was supposed to leave. You see, a dog like that, should that be in a sanctuary? I don't know. It depends. So when you look at the stories of these dogs and you have someone narrating this event as if it's the dog, the dog, the dog, in some ways, yes. Should dangerous dogs be euthanized? Maybe, yeah. I mean, we don't necessarily want to coexist in society with irresponsible owners and dangerous dogs. It's a bad combination. But if you continue to have handlers that are putting the dog in a situation where they are going to make mistakes and do their worst, then who is that really on? So when I tell you that the little things like where you position yourself next to the gate with a dog that's guarding space matters, that's why. Okay, so we have the choice when we go in and work with dogs who have behavior challenges. You don't always know what the challenges are. Sometimes they're new and you're just a new handler working with a new dog. But if there's anything that sends a signal to you that you should not walk into that kennel, don't. But devise a system where you can begin to break down those barriers and change the dog's perception of what they need to do or their emotional state, so that if we're lucky enough to place them, there's something in place that you can actually guide an adopter to continue rather than just taking a problem and dumping it in someone else's lap, because that's not okay. Yes, I do too. But I also think that neutral is an amazing tool for teaching. But it has, goodbye, I'll speak to you later. But it has to be juxtaposed to a tremendous amount of reinforcement, because the only way that neutral will register to a dog who is reading your expression and your body language is if it feels different than when you are constantly reinforcing. So for the dogs that come here, I'm telling them everything they do is amazing. Did you just pee? Are you resting? Did you just lay down? Look at you. I'm finding everything I can to show them how pleased I am with what they're doing, so that when they make the mistake, because they will, my affect becomes neutral. That's why I don't have to use tools and I don't have to punish, because my punishment in my corrections are the removal of emotional support. I do the same thing with children, right? I don't like that, and I want you to know it, but I don't have to put my hands on you to get you to learn that lesson, okay? Now, the back ties and the way you arrange space and where you put yourself in that space are critically important when you're doing behavior modification. Your physical presence should not feel like a big deal to a dog. I have so many videos that I cannot share with you because they're confidential, of working sessions. That's right. Social support has a lot of power as long as it's not cruel or unnecessary. It's disappointment. So do you remember the video of Jude trying to run to the back fence and scale it to attack the dogs on the other side when we moved here? I had him on a long line. He got tangled, so I had to let it go. Also, we had a fence. So he ran to that fence line, and I very quickly wrapped his long line around a tree. The reason I did that was so that I didn't have to be involved in his fight. I didn't want to be holding on to his leash because that's what he expected. We're all going at it and you're with me and it's all this chaos. And I didn't want any chaos. So I wrapped the leash around the tree. And when he turned around and I was standing there like, I'm not doing this, he was so confused that he walked away from the fence line. So your neutrality should be systematic, well-timed, well-placed, and intentional, right? That's why you start with all of this. You start from the outside, but you don't put yourself in the mix like something they have to contend with. That's the opposite of what you want to do. You pass by that kennel repeatedly and you throw handfuls of steak into the kennel. Now the dog doesn't even have time to react to you because you only mean food to them. You do not mean you have to make a decision about my presence. You have to decide if you like me or if you're going to go for me. Over and over and over, and then slow down. When I talk to you about tempo in learning, you may or may not have noticed that everything in my videos, my teaching videos, I move faster with the dog and then I slow down. And then I pick it up a little bit, and then I slow down. And that is what you do when you're working with a dog in a cage because they have no choice but to notice you and feel like they either need to fight back or they're getting ready for some kind of pressure or conflict from you. And that's tightening up their state of mind rather than making them go, you want curiosity. It's one of the healthiest places in the brain that you can tap into. So if I have a dog going, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. Wait, what do you do? Wait, you're not, what? What? Oh, wait, what? That's what you want. You got to go for, wait, what? So all the videos you see of my clients' dogs going like this, looking up at them, that's the wait, what? Once you've got, wait, what? Now you've got the door open and then you can literally open the door. But stand behind it because they're still not sure. And then you can start adjusting and showing them that they don't need to fight back and there's not even a reason to create space because you're not doing anything. Make sense? 25 bags of high value. Well, hopefully they know to do the protocols and what that looks like, because unfortunately we are so behind the 8 ball with shelters who are still using Assessa hands and putting dogs in the worst possible position that they're going to fight back and then they get in trouble. You know, so when I see the Sue Sternberg videos of dogs chasing down kids and then they put a kid in a yard, a stuffed child or something like some makeshift thing that looks like a child and the dog goes after it. Does that concern me? Yeah, it does. But I'm always like making room for what the dog's eyes are seeing, and is it really the child or is it the frenzy? Because I've worked with dogs who have bitten children who were flailing and screaming, and it was more the chaos that the dog couldn't reconcile than that it was a child. And over time, the dog ended up making choices to walk away from children because you have to delineate in their brains what is chaos and what might chaos be associated with so that there's something to circumvent that instant response, because that anything can be chaotic. It's the brain and the process of thinking. Yes, you can tell me how much we helped. I'm thrilled. Yeah, I know. It's just most of the people that come to me have seen many other trainers or sent their dogs to a board and train and spend so much money only to have their dogs, unfortunately, put in a kennel and only taken out for pressure cooker training sessions with lots of obedience and control. So in those cases, you're actually building the behaviors that you don't want. It's just so unnecessary. this other trainer uses long leash fed through back and forces dog into crate. Yes, I know. I don't know who you're talking about, but I don't like that. So, and like you, I don't like that. The problem is the confinement. So I personally am teaching a dog to be behind a baby gate, not in a cage, because they just came out of cages. It's the one thing they don't want to do. Their experiences in those kennels are horrendous. So the last thing we want to do is coerce them to get into that crate. Try, that's the only place they eat. That's where we're around them like a bunch of sharks watching and observing. It's so unfair to the dog. But teaching a dog to be comfortable behind a baby gate is as hard sometimes as teaching them to go into a crate, but they do not have confinement, and you get a lot better results because of that. I feel very strongly about this, as you can see. I hope that helps you guys. We will continue to do this kind of thing. I don't know that we'll get into it today, but one of the things that we have to, goodbye, I'll see you on Sunday. We may be doing a puppy case tomorrow night. Thank you. The case studies program is tomorrow night for anybody who is unaware. And, but if you want to be in that, you have to DM me your email quickly, because we are coming up on it. I'll be sending out case study notes in advance. Also, I want you to, before we wrap, unless there are more questions, I want you to consider that so many of these shelters, I'm excited. I love our case studies group. Tomorrow's not going to be that big either. I think a lot of people are traveling or out of town. I don't know if spring break falls at this time for some parents, but so many of these shelters, and I just found this out about Maya, have their dogs on, no, that's okay, but you'll get comfortable and we'll participate over time. So many of these dogs have, usually there's like 25 people in the group, and this week I think there will be 10. So many of these shelters have their dogs on the case studies group is a private group, so that we can do this off of TikTok. And I don't do them every week. I do them every 2 or 3 weeks. It's $35 for the class. It runs about 2 hours, but it's invaluable. As you can see by the comments, it's okay. It's invaluable because I send out the notes of the case. These are cases I work on. I send out the notes to everybody in advance and kind of let everyone see what I see before I start a consultation with somebody. It's the intake form. And then I discuss the case with everyone and we break it down. And you can understand how I start to piece together behavior modification and helping the dogs. So whatever end of this you're in, whether you're a pet parent or you work in a shelter, it is that breaking apart the Rubik's Cube that is so important, because most of these cases are pretty severe. And you can hear my medical discoveries, pain discoveries, history discoveries that the owner doesn't tell me because they forgot or they didn't really know, or we have to dig in deeper. But there's no obedience in it at all. And I just don't think there's any place for people who want to be better dog handlers to learn. The last one was the trauma case. It was very hard, very hard. All you have to do, so it's tomorrow night. So if you want to do it, you have to just DM me your email, but it's not free. It's $35 per class. So I don't care if you and a couple of shelter people sign up together. I'll send you all the links, but just know that. And then once you're on the master list for that email, we send it out to the people on that list 5 days before. And we'll send you the link to the Google Meet. Anyway, these conversations are very important. I was going to say that a number of the shelters that keep long-stayed dogs with very complex behaviors, they're often there for long periods of time, and the shelters are medicating them on heavy sedation, and they don't tell anybody. It's not that they're hiding it, it's just it doesn't get mentioned when they get adopted. And so I did not know, and only found out recently, that trazodone is something that Maya was on for years. And when I heard it, I was so irate, because if a dog is on sedatives for years and you don't know that and you bring them home, the withdrawal is very serious and can exacerbate the behaviors. And I am now wondering how much crossover there was between what appeared as a neuro problem, which I believe has been the case since she was a puppy, because she's had these behaviors since she was a young dog. How much of that was exacerbated by withdrawal? All the rocking and bobbing and weaving, and more defense. Right, exactly. So like, it is withdrawal, like anything else. This trazodone is, and you never give a dog with a bite history trazodone. You don't do that. She's at the shelter. Yeah, she's at the shelter. I'm working on her behind the scenes. Yeah, I was told that she had been on trazodone in her home. I was never told she was in trazodone in the shelter. And so she came here and was immediately off everything. And you all know what that story was like. So I'm working on her, but it's fair. Thank you. The problem with the shelter Maya is in is they have stopped letting the public come into the shelter. They claim that it's too noisy for the dogs. They've got 100 dogs there. The dogs are barking all the time, and now nobody can see them. And if you want to adopt a dog and meet them, you are not allowed to meet them. You have to fill out an application. So nobody can see what's going on behind closed doors, behind closed dogs. They are sending cats to sanctuaries that are very, very ill, and then degrading from there. Dogs are going into sanctuaries and nobody knows where they are and what happens to them. There are lawsuits up and down. And I'm trying to deal with people behind the scenes to make it clear. Nobody has told anybody about my eval, the 5 pages of notes that I had on that dog and her medical condition and her behaviors in nothing. It's the problem. And this may be why I talk to you about this all the time. The problem is the volunteer population, who believe that the 15-minute walk that they give the dogs 3 times a week, they believe they know these dogs better than anybody. And it's the same volunteer population that got that dog euthanized by going 2 people into a kennel. I mean, I'm not arguing he should have been euthanized at all. I'm just saying that there are no real protocols, and they are a very powerful force to be reckoned with. They would rather Maya go to a very punishing balance trainer to live not in a kennel, but in a crate, which would be so much worse for her, and do obedience training than actually accept what her limitations are and how well she did here without pressure and conflict. But her medical was above my pay grade. And I cannot believe that the volunteers have so much control over what happens. So that's where we are. It's a terrible, terrible situation. And there's only so much battle I can do. Right? I mean, I've been working on it for the last couple of weeks and I'm exhausted and frustrated. So it just inspires me to share with you the other side of the coin when you're dealing with shelter dogs, because I want you to see that no matter how hard the behavior looks, and whatever the notes are, that if you can find an inroad with these dogs and understand the world from their perspective, more often than not, you're going to change the course of their lives and their response to the world around them. And all the dogs that I work with were unseen. The first dog that I pulled from the shelter tried to attack someone on the behavior team. They didn't like this dog. But to be fair, the dog was so ill. There are videos with me and him working around the kennels, and he couldn't sit down. He had a number of conditions. Both knees had to be replaced. He'd lived on a cement floor for 4 years, and his spine was damaged. His legs were damaged. The behavior team did not like him, and they put him on a muzzle in a yard with 3 people on the behavior team and tried to poke him in the hind end. They didn't know that he had medical problems, but he had responded poorly to someone when they bumped him in the back. So they thought they'd recreate the situation to work on his behavior. This is what I'm talking about. So they put him in a muzzle where he's vulnerable and defenseless, 85-pound pit bull, poked him in the hind end where his pain points were because they weren't smart enough to know that that was going on. And he tried to bite them. And then he was made a red dog, red zone, red lock on his kennel. And I took him into foster and placed him, and that was it. And he lived there for the rest of his life. So, you know, opinions and thoughts and all of that, you have to get back down to what is the dog saying, because they don't have an opportunity. So I hope this was helpful. I love you too. I know I'm a little crazy. I think it's so important. So I'm really glad that we had a chance to talk about it. I know I arranged this on a day that a lot of people weren't around, but we'll do it again. They honestly, how do they qualify? They're often just hired. Most shelters, if you put your if you look at the top of my page, there's a notification button. That'll tell you when I'm live and when I post. Thank you. It's good to see you too. Most shelters don't really have behavior teams. You know, they just hire people to handle the tough dogs. So it's not like they had extensive training, and unless they had a great mentor and got to learn this stuff in real time and really wanted to learn, like those of us who were obsessed with the long stay dogs, we had to know because their lives were in our hands. They had no chance otherwise. So, I mean, I can't tell you the dogs that someone forgot to evaluate them with other dogs. And they said they were this or they were that, and they went on to live with dogs and cats and children just because they fell through the cracks. So whatever we can do to kind of shift the perspective of what it's like to be a confined animal with people just looking at you and poking at you and sticking rubber hands in your face, we'll do it. We'll do it as many times as we need to. But okay, I got to go do Luke's physical therapy. It was good to see you all. And we will keep talking. And for those of you in class tomorrow night, I will see you then. Does anybody have any questions before we go? You're welcome. Yes. Did you see the back of his ear? Hold on. Come here. Let me see if I can show you. Turn around. Look. Can you see that? All that fur that was removed? Come here. All this, they took the mass off here. I'm being very, very careful with him because I think there's a great deal of pain going on here. So he's like leash walks only for the most part. But I'll get I got the x-ray results back, but the mass removal, I'm waiting on the results of that. Hopefully it's not mast cell, but one thing at a time. And I was told I have to go say